I wake up most days before the sun is fully up here in Scottsdale. I like the heavy silence of the early morning in the desert, long before the heat starts to distort the landscape and make the horizon shimmer. I usually take my water out to the back patio and just sit there, watching how the environment out here is entirely unforgiving to anything that doesn't know how to retain its own moisture. The desert has a brutal, quiet way of teaching you about drying out and getting stiff. If you don't maintain your infrastructure out here, you dry up, you harden, and eventually you crack. It is simply the rule of the environment, and for a very long time, I walked around genuinely believing that the basic rules of biology and environment did not apply to me. Looking back at my 40s, I still felt like I had my hands firmly on the steering wheel. I was a corporate sales executive, building a demanding career, living off adrenaline, quarterly targets, and sheer forward momentum. I traveled constantly. There were years where I knew the inside of the United clubs at O'Hare and Dallas-Fort Worth better than I knew the layout of my own living room. I treated my body like a rental car with unlimited mileage and full insurance coverage. I demanded performance from it. I pushed the engine into the red every single week, and the machine always seemed to cooperate. I looked a little younger than I was. I had a certain kind of bulletproof social confidence, and I honestly believed that willpower could override any mechanical failure. But the bill always comes due. You can only run a system on emergency reserves for so long before the internal wiring starts to fry. When the first signs of change actually started to show up, I did exactly what we all do. I manufactured excuses. The heavy, muddy fatigue that would hit me around 3 in the afternoon wasn't a system warning, I told myself. It was just the stress of a pending contract. The morning physical response that started getting less and less predictable wasn't a loss of vitality, it was just the result of a bad night of sleep in a terrible hotel bed. The libido that used to be a reliable, quiet hum in the background and suddenly felt entirely absent was just because of a heavy week. I was selling myself a story, and I was a very good salesman. But you cannot outtalk a physical reality. As I crossed into my early 50s, things stopped being easy to hide. It wasn't just being tired anymore. It was the specific, quiet humiliation of being with my wife at the time, wanting things to work the way they had always worked, and feeling the body simply refuse to respond. When your body stops doing what you expect it to do, when the hydraulics just fail, the silence in the room afterward is deafening. I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't say a word. I just rolled over, stared at the ceiling, and mentally blamed the stress of my job. I started avoiding intimacy altogether. I would stay up late answering emails that didn't need to be answered until morning. I would manufacture arguments over trivial things just to create enough emotional distance so that the physical distance made sense. I wasn't doing it maliciously. I was doing it because I was terrified. And I had absolutely no vocabulary for that terror. My first marriage ended during this phase. I am not going to sit here and tell you that a lack of blood flow caused my divorce. That would be an oversimplification. But I know for an absolute fact that the emotional distancing, the active avoidance, the unspoken shame, and my deeply ingrained habit of inventing excuses instead of having hard, honest conversations were the hammer and chisel that broke the foundation apart. I do not blame her. I know exactly what I was hiding from. The rebuilding process was not quick, and it was not a movie montage. It was slow, and it started with me finally admitting that the engine was knocking, and I didn't know how to fix it. I started reading, not the surface-level magazine articles, but reading about how the male infrastructure actually operates as it ages. I had to approach it the same way I used to approach a failing sales territory. I needed to understand the logistics of the problem. What I found was that I had been looking at the problem entirely backward. I thought I had a localized issue. I thought something was just broken down there. But I learned that what we call erectile dysfunction is rarely a standalone event. It is a hydraulic failure caused by a systemic traffic jam. I started looking closely at our internal piping, the arteries and blood vessels. I used to think of them as just rigid copper pipes, like the plumbing in a house, but they aren't. They are living, flexible tissue. They are lined with a microscopic layer, something called the endothelium. Think of it like the Teflon coating inside a high-end frying pan. When we are young, that lining is smooth, slick, and highly responsive. Blood rushes through effortlessly, and the vessel can expand and dilate exactly when it needs to. But over time, through years of terrible airport food, chronic low-level stress, and running on cortisol, we essentially start pouring acid down our own pipes. The internal environment becomes acidic and inflamed. That smooth Teflon lining gets roughened up. But more importantly, the pipes lose their ability to relax. They become stiff. And in a man's body, especially when it comes to confidence in the bedroom, the ability of those pipes to relax and widen is literally everything. The mechanics of an erection require the arteries to dilate. If the pipes are stiff, the pressure never builds. The system fails. I realized I was walking around in a constant, low-grade state of acidity. My body was operating like a desert environment, dried out and tense. When the body is highly acidic, it goes into a protective mode. It constricts the blood vessels to preserve the core organs. It's a defense mechanism. But that defense mechanism completely kills the blood flow we need for everything else, from having energy in the afternoon to actually performing when the lights go out. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, looking at all this information and feeling a strange sense of relief. I wasn't broken. I wasn't just universally aging into obsolescence. My pipes were just constricted because my internal environment was a mess. I didn't need a magic pill to force the system open. I needed to change the environment so the pipes would relax on their own. I started looking for ways to neutralize that internal acidity, to get the tension out of the plumbing. And the most effective thing I found wasn't a high-end supplement or a complex medical intervention. It was something sitting right in my pantry: bicarbonate, baking soda. At first, it sounded ridiculous. I actually laughed when I first read about men using it to help with blood flow. But the mechanical logic of it was flawless. Our bodies use bicarbonate naturally as a buffer to fight off acid. It's how the system maintains balance. But as we get older and as we abuse the machine with stress and garbage fuel, we burn through our natural reserves. We stay acidic, the vessels stay tight, and the blood stops flowing where it needs to go. I decided to run a test on my own hardware, but I knew enough not to just start eating spoonfuls of the stuff. This is about maintenance, not flooding the engine. Baking soda is high in sodium, and at my age, you don't mess around with reckless sodium spikes. It had to be precise. I created a very specific, very quiet daily habit. Every single morning, right when I woke up, before the coffee, before looking at my phone, I took a tall glass of filtered water. I added a tiny pinch of baking soda, not a scoop, just an eighth to a quarter of a teaspoon, barely enough to cover the tip of a spoon. Then I added a fresh squeeze of lemon juice. Now, on the surface, that makes no sense. Lemon is acidic. Why would I add acid to fight acid? But I had learned that the body is a strange factory. When we metabolize that lemon juice, the byproduct it leaves behind is actually highly alkaline. It provides the minerals the body needs. The baking soda acts as an immediate buffer to neutralize the overnight acid buildup, and the lemon provides the long-term mineral support to keep the environment stable. I started drinking this every morning. I added a second glass in the mid-afternoon, right around that time when my energy would usually crash, and I would find myself staring blankly at a spreadsheet. I didn't tell anyone I was doing it. I just quietly made it part of the daily operational protocol. The changes were not explosive. There were no fireworks. It felt more like a very heavy, tight belt was slowly being loosened around my entire circulatory system. The first thing I noticed was the afternoon fatigue. It didn't vanish entirely, but the steep drop-off flattened out. I wasn't hitting a wall at 3 o'clock anymore. My hands and feet, which had started feeling cold all the time, felt warm again. The circulation was pushing further out into the extremities. And then, after a few weeks, the other things started to come back online. The morning predictability returned. The heavy, dead feeling in my lower body started to lift. When my body needed to respond, the resistance was gone. The pipes were relaxing. The hydraulics were working again because the system wasn't fighting a constant state of acidic tension. By the time I met Alyssa, my second wife, I was a different man. Not because I was younger, but because I was no longer hiding from my own biology. Alyssa is 9 years younger than me, an ex-interior design consultant, and she possesses a level of direct, emotional honesty that completely dismantled my old corporate defense mechanisms. Early in our relationship, when things didn't work perfectly one night, I felt that old familiar panic rising in my chest, that urge to make an excuse, to roll over, to shut down, but I didn't. I looked at her, I took a breath, and I just told her the truth. I told her I was tired, that my system was dragging, and that it had nothing to do with her. We talked about it, simple as that. The world didn't end. And the irony is, taking the pressure off the situation entirely is exactly what allows the physical tension to drop. We don't talk enough about how the physical and the mental feed each other. What begins as a physical plumbing issue almost always ends up as a mental block. When the body fails, the mind panics, and the panic constricts the blood vessels even further. It is a brutal loop. You have to break it from both ends. You have to have the honest conversations to clear the mental tension, and you have to maintain the physical infrastructure to clear the biological tension. I still drink my water with that small pinch of bicarbonate and lemon every morning. It is non-negotiable for me. It is just basic maintenance, like checking the oil pressure. It isn't a replacement for putting in the real work. I still have to walk every day. I still do light resistance training to keep my muscles demanding oxygen. I still have to be fiercely disciplined about my sleep. If you are eating garbage, drinking too much, and sleeping 4 hours a night, a pinch of baking soda is like throwing a cup of water on a house fire. But if you are putting in the effort and still feeling that stiffness, that lack of response, that loss of vitality, it might just be that your internal environment is working against you. I look at my son Ethan now. He's 31, working commercial real estate, grinding out the hours, living on coffee and stress, thinking he is invincible. I recognize that look in his eye. It is the exact same look I had. And I know that if he doesn't learn how to maintain his internal environment now, he will hit the same wall I did. I talked to him about it, not with clinical lectures, but just by telling him what happened to me, because men don't learn from lectures. We learn from watching the guy slightly further down the road who already stepped on the landmine. A lot of men walking around right now are not fundamentally broken. They are just incredibly acidic, incredibly tense, and ignoring the wrong things. We spend our 50s waiting way too long to face what has changed. We think admitting a mechanical failure makes us less of a man. But the truth is, the only thing that strips your dignity is the silent refusal to fix what you know is failing. Try the water. Get some high-quality filtered water tomorrow morning. Add the tiny pinch of bicarbonate. Squeeze the lemon, drink it down, and just pay attention to how your engine runs for the rest of the day. Notice if the afternoon feels a little lighter. Notice if the morning feels a little more familiar. I am not telling you this will fix every complicated thing in your life. I am telling you that it changed the environment inside my body enough to make me feel like I was occupying my own skin again. It gave me enough momentum to keep going. We are all just managing the wear and tear on the machine. Keep the pipes clean. Keep the pressure steady. Have the conversations you are avoiding. The sun is fully up here now, and the heat is starting to settle in. I've got a long walk to take and a lot of day left to manage. Take care of your infrastructure. We will talk again soon.